You know what we used to call Sarah's pet projects. Mark's voice slithers out of my laptop like a grease fire in an airless room. The museum of failed ideas. Laughter. Real, gleeful, backslapping laughter. I freeze the frame right as his smug face tilts toward the conference room mic, basking in the glow of his own cruelty, like it's a spotlight meant just for him. You can almost hear the dopamine flood behind his eyes. I've replayed that moment so many times the pixels should have filed a restraining order. I know every smirk, every scoff, every clap from my ex-teammates, the same people who used to beg me to troubleshoot their launch decks, who called me the brain like it was a compliment, not a shield they hid behind during every product review. And now, they're all in that room, laughing like hyenas around a carcass. Only the carcass is me. I don't pause it this time. I let the video crawl forward, watching him sip from his custom-branded company thermos like he's some kind of thought leader, and not just a man riding inertia and inherited contacts. Don't worry, he chuckles. We cleaned out that idea graveyard during Q2. More laughter. Even louder this time. I don't blink. I just reach for the mouse, click Save As, and rename the file. Mouthful of bleed-out laughs in P4, then I drag it into a folder buried 6 layers deep on a secure SSD labeled Receipts. Inside that folder, the original Nightingale pitch deck, every slide timestamped. The email from Mark where he called it too disruptive for our current roadmap. The formal rejection notice that I printed, scanned, and notarized like a death certificate. My licensing contract with Innovate Corp. And now, this video is public execution disguised as a joke. There's something sacred about evidence. It doesn't scream, it doesn't cry, it just sits. Cold, patient, indifferent, like a loaded gun in a locked drawer. I close the laptop slowly, pressing the lid down like sealing a tomb. The room around me is silent but not empty. There's a new gravity here, like the air itself is holding its breath with me. Outside the window, the skyline of the city flickers, glass and steel monuments to men like Mark, all inflated charisma and polished mediocrity. But tonight, those towers don't intimidate me. They look fragile, hollow, ready to crack under the weight of one good push. A year ago, I was standing in that same all-hands meeting, holding a prototype in my hand while Mark scrolled through his phone under the table. A year ago, I still thought meritocracy was real. I thought good ideas could win. Now I know better. Now I know how to weaponize rejection. Because what that roomful of clapping sycophants didn't know, and what Mark, in all his cocky oblivion, never thought to ask, was that Nightingale wasn't dead. It wasn't abandoned. It was evolving, quietly, legally, under the radar and fully armed. Their joke became my fuel. Their laughter the match, and Mark, he just handed me the last piece of evidence I needed. Proof on video that he dismissed the very thing that would bring him to his knees. I stand, stretch, and feel my spine click into place like a trigger resetting. There's no rage left, just precision, just gravity. They laughed at the ghost of an idea. Now they'll choke on its resurrection. The first mistake I made was dressing up for the pitch. Blue blazer, minimal jewelry, hair straightened so sleek it could have sliced through drywall. Even wore those god-forsaken heels that made me walk like a baby deer on a frozen lake. I did it because I thought it mattered. Thought maybe if I looked the part, Mark would finally see me. He didn't. He was already halfway into his phone by the time I clicked to slide 2. Today I want to talk to you about a concept I've been developing off the side of my desk, codename Project Nightingale. I began, voice firm but hopeful, kind of hopeful that hasn't been beaten down yet. I'd spent months pulling together the market analysis, behavioral forecasts, hardware feasibility reports, even got an intern to mock up UI animations in Figma over her spring break. This is a next-generation healthcare interface, I said, moving through the slides. Predictive care logic, adaptive personalization, low-code back-end support for clinic systems, and most importantly, affordable to scale. Mark didn't look up. His phone buzzed once, twice, then he let out a chuckle, while I was breaking down how Nightingale could reduce intake processing time by 38%. I kept going anyway, because that's what you do when you're a woman in tech trying not to look emotional. You power through while your boss flirts with a screen. When I finally stopped talking, the silence was like a slap. Mark blinked once, looked at the ceiling like he was trying to find a reason not to yawn, and said, "I appreciate the initiative, Sarah, but it's just not aligned with our current performance verticals." I waited. Maybe he'd follow up, ask a question. Give me a thread to pull on. Nothing. He rubbed his temple, still not making eye contact. It's interesting, but not really synergistic with our long-term vision. He actually used the word synergistic. I felt my fingernails bite into my palm. I tried to salvage it. It's complementary to our existing platform. We could pilot in the Midwest clinics we're already partnered with. The risk is low. The upside is, Mark held up a hand like I was interrupting him. Let's circle back if it becomes relevant. For now, maybe just keep it in the idea vault, all right? Idea vault. That's what he called the trash can where ambition goes to die. Left the room without even grabbing the printed brief I'd placed in front of him. The pages fluttered slightly from the AC vent as the door shut behind him. I stood there in silence, in those goddamn heels, with a revolutionary concept in my hands and no one to hear it. An hour later, his email arrived. Subject, Nightingale Proposal Body. Sarah, thanks for your presentation. After reviewing your materials, I've decided not to move forward with the Nightingale concept at this time. Appreciate your efforts. Mark, no explanation, no critique, just a polite dismissal wrapped in bulletproof corporate detachment. I read it 3 times, then forwarded it to my personal email. I created a new folder in my archive system, rejected projects /Nightingale/official document/. I exported a PDF copy, applied a timestamp, encrypted it, uploaded a backup to cold storage. He had no idea he'd just signed the first page of his own obituary. That night, barefoot in sweatpants and a band tee, I opened my private laptop, typed in my 6-word password, and pulled up a file I hadn't touched in months, Plan B.docx. I renamed it, Nightingale Rebirth Confidential v1.1, and then I got to work. No more compromises. No more begging for permission to matter. Mark wanted synergy. He was about to get it with a competitor who actually had vision. The first time I emailed Innovate Corp, I used a throwaway Proton Mail account created in a public library 12 miles from my apartment. I even wore a hoodie and paid for the parking meter in cash. I wasn't paranoid, I was surgical. This wasn't some resume toss into a recruiter abyss. This was bait, sharpened, designed to be noticed, but not traceable. Subject line: Proposal for strategic synergy in predictive healthcare, confidential body. I'm a senior-level product designer in the enterprise healthcare space. I've developed a next-generation interface with validated market research and untapped potential in underserved clinical systems. The project was recently shelved by my current employer due to short-sighted leadership. I believe it has high compatibility with Innovate Corp's current expansion targets, prepared to meet off-site anonymously and share a non-proprietary overview if mutual interest exists. Please respond only if discretion is guaranteed. Nightingale. I hovered over the send button for a solid 30 seconds, my hand actually trembling, not from fear of getting caught, from hope, from the dangerous little thought that maybe, just maybe, I didn't have to bury this idea with the rest of my unrealized potential. Then I clicked send. I closed the browser, wiped the session, left the library, and drove home in silence with my heart jackhammering against my ribs like it was trying to break out and start its own company. I didn't sleep that night. The next morning, while pretending to fix a broken slide deck for the UX team's QBR, my burner account pinged. Response from sdos@innovatecorp.com. Thank you for your message. Your proposal is intriguing. Would be open to a brief conversation under NDA to assess fit. If that's agreeable, please share a secure communication method and your availability for a short meeting offsite. I stared at that response like it was an alien transmission. Short, professional. But that last line, that was interest. That was real. My hands moved before I could overthink. I set up an encrypted Signal account, attached a redacted overview of the Nightingale framework, no code, no internal metrics, just the bones, and suggested a 30-minute coffee meeting at a hotel cafe downtown, under the name A. Nightingale. He agreed within the hour, and just like that, I'd crossed the line. I wasn't just stewing in quiet resentment anymore. I was actively building the bomb that would eventually level Mark's little kingdom. Every night that week, I came home and reworked the Nightingale schematic like it was a broken rosary I could finally fix. No more performance reviews, no more office politics, no more smiling while idiots explain my prototypes back to me. Just pure focus. Line by line, page by page, rewriting the narrative they tried to choke out of me. I was careful. No file touched the company laptop. Nothing was stored on cloud drives. I wrote in offline markdown editors and saved to encrypted thumb drives I carried in my bra like a damn talisman. At work, I was quiet, obedient. I smiled in meetings, took notes, gave Mark no reason to suspect I was anything more than just another loyal cog in his executive sandbox. But inside, I was alive again. For the first time in years, I didn't feel like a passenger in my own career. I wasn't asking for a seat at the table anymore. I was building a better table somewhere else, and I had already mailed out the invitations. The night before the meeting, I stood in front of my closet like I was dressing for espionage. Business casual, but not expensive, unbranded laptop. A clean notebook with the first 10 pages ripped out. No traceable identifiers. My fingerprints were scrubbed, but the idea was glowing, pulsing, ready. When I walked into the cafe and saw the man waiting, dark suit, modest watch, a company badge flipped backward, I didn't smile. I extended a hand. He took it. Miss Nightingale, I presume. And just like that, I wasn't trapped anymore. I wasn't dismissed or ignored or laughed out of a room. I was the keeper of something powerful, something they had thrown away. And now someone else was willing to listen. The man from Innovate Corp introduced himself as Stephen Dawes, strategy development, mid-40s, polite to a fault, and radiating the kind of alert curiosity you only see in people who know how to turn risk into capital. Ordered an herbal tea he didn't drink, and nodded slowly through the first 7 minutes of my pitch, without interrupting once. That alone told me he was smarter than 90% of the people I'd worked with. I gave him a version of Nightingale with the sharp edges filed down. No proprietary code, no internal architecture diagrams. Just the vision, the scaffolding of a platform that could rewire care delivery from the ground up. A modular AI-assisted intake layer, cross-clinic interoperability, and predictive analytics designed to evolve with patient histories. Enough to spark interest, not enough to steal. By slide 3, his expression shifted from polite interest to something sharper. He wasn't just listening, he was calculating. I could see it behind his glasses, the flicker of gears locking into place. When I finished, he sat back, hands folded, and said, "You're either very brave or very tired." "Both," I replied. He smiled, not like he was amused, more like he respected the gamble. "I'd like to set up a meeting," he said. "Our product and legal teams. You'll need to provide documentation proving you own the rights." I slid a single printed email across the table. Mark's formal rejection of Nightingale, time-stamped, signed, forwarded from my corporate account to my personal inbox with headers intact. I didn't say a word as he read it. I didn't need to. Even looked up and gave the faintest nod. Let's talk terms. That night, I lay awake staring at the ceiling fan, heart thudding like I'd swallowed a war drum. This wasn't a daydream anymore. It was happening. The kind of happening you can't undo. Within 2 weeks, I was back at that same cafe, sitting across from 2 lawyers in pressed suits and a product manager with an iPad full of annotated notes. We negotiated for 3 hours. I signed a preliminary development and licensing agreement under my name. Not as a proxy, not as an employee. As Sarah Levens, sole IP holder and principal architect of Nightingale. Clause 3.2, subject to validation of ownership, Innovate Corp reserves exclusive rights to implementation and commercialization. Clause 7.1, licensing fees to be negotiated pending prototype demonstration. Clause 12, NDA enforced, binding both parties. I walked out with a thumb drive full of possibility and a signature that made the betrayal official. I had switched sides, no turning back. Back at my day job, I lived like a ghost. I still showed up to status meetings, still gave feedback on design iterations I'd stopped caring about months ago. But every moment felt like watching a movie of myself. Sarah, the good soldier. Sarah, the professional. Sarah didn't just sign away her soul to the competition. Every time Mark passed my desk and gave that vacant nod, I imagined shoving the licensing agreement in his face like a subpoena. But I didn't. I waited, because the plan was bigger than him now. Then came the email, subject, team restructuring notice immediate. I knew the second I opened it. I wasn't angry. I wasn't surprised. I was ready. When HR called me in, the tone was apologetic but practiced. Realignment, strategic refocus, nothing personal. They handed me a white box for my desk items and a folder with my severance package. As I packed up the last of my things, an old mousepad, my branded thermos, a broken badge lanyard, I saw Mark walk past without looking in. No smirk, no nod, just a blur of indifference in a tailored suit. But I smiled, not fake, not bitter. It felt like release, because the severance check wasn't an insult, it was fuel. I deposited it on the drive home, then sat in the parking lot of a CVS and pulled out my phone. I called Stephen. "I'm free," I said. "Let's get to work." We built Nightingale like a war machine, quiet, armored, and lethal. No splashy announcements, no leaks, just raw development under lock and key. I spent 12-hour days at Innovate Corp's off-grid skunkworks facility, surrounded by whiteboards packed with system flowcharts and engineers who didn't talk unless it was about throughput optimization or user latency curves. I hadn't felt that alive in a decade. Their legal team wasted no time. Within 3 weeks, we filed the full-stack patent, hardware interface, AI module, remote care integration, all under my name. Every technical detail I'd ever envisioned for Nightingale now lived inside a bulletproof patent, time-stamped, notarized, and logged in 3 separate jurisdictions. The morning I signed the exclusive licensing agreement, I didn't feel giddy. I didn't cry. I felt clean, like I'd shed the last layer of corporate rot that had clung to me for years. Nightingale wasn't just mine, it was real, and now it had teeth. Meanwhile, in the festering pit I'd once called an employer, someone left the vault door open. A junior manager named Trent, or maybe Trevor, never cared enough to remember, was digging through old archived folders on the shared server, probably fishing for something to slap his name on during review season. And there it was, my original Nightingale deck, stripped of metadata but still intact. I'd left it there intentionally, buried but not deleted. He opened it, skimmed it, thought he'd found gold. 3 days later, I got a message from a burner LinkedIn account, one of my few allies still inside. "Hey, some weasel's going around claiming he discovered an old internal proposal and is pitching it to Mark like it's the next iPhone. It's your Nightingale deck. Just FYI. I stared at the message for a full minute, the corners of my mouth curling. I typed exactly 3 words back, I know. Let him. Because this was the bait. The trap I'd laid the night, I'd forwarded Mark's rejection email to my personal archive. Now some overeager corporate ladder climber was dangling it like a fresh kill in front of the king himself. What did Mark see? A young guy bringing him a forgotten gem from the ashes. Something visionary but undeveloped. Something he could salvage, repackage, and claim as his own. And of course, he bit. A week later, industry blogs were buzzing. Insider sources, Titan X Corp pouring millions into top-secret flagship project. No name attached yet. The breadcrumbs were obvious. Disruptive healthcare interface. Revolutionizing patient interaction. Projected Q3 launch with AI support. Mark was quoted in a podcast teasing a bold leap forward, the kind of idea that sets us apart and shows we don't just follow trends, we create them. I listened to it twice, once to transcribe his exact phrasing, and once just to savor the stupidity. Because while he was busy promising the future, already owned it. Innovate Corp had quietly scheduled Nightingale's public debut for early Q2, months ahead of Mark's internal timeline. The announcement would hit like a meteor, complete with demo footage, media kits, and keynote teasers from our partner clinics. Back at Titan X, Mark was doubling down, redirecting budgets, poaching devs from other teams, locking his legacy onto a blueprint I'd authored. He thought he was being clever, visionary, touchable. He had no idea he was cribbing from a patent already sealed and armed. I watched from the sidelines, quiet, composed, and cruel in ways I never knew I could be. This wasn't revenge anymore. This was symphony, and the overture had just begun. Mark didn't just take the bait, he built a throne out of it. 2 weeks after the internal buzz started, Titan X restructured its Q2 budget. Entire departments saw funding slashed overnight. Wellness initiatives, internal analytics, even parts of HR. All funneled into what Mark started calling Project Alpha, like he was naming a military operation instead of a stolen pitch deck he barely understood. At the next quarterly board meeting, he strode in late wearing a custom-tailored blazer and that infuriating smirk that always made him look like he just out-negotiated God. His presentation. A full-scale rollout plan. App mock-ups, market projections, a 6-figure marketing blitz. The timeline was impossible. The budget was reckless. The ego was nuclear. Game changer, he called it. Category killer. Our legacy product for the next generation. He dropped phrases like vertical integration of behavioral diagnostics and adaptive UI personalization, word for word from my original documentation, as if they were fresh from the genius tree growing in his corner office. One of my contacts, still embedded at Titan X, sent me a picture from the meeting room, Mark standing in front of a slide that literally said, "The future of patient interaction, my vision." I printed it, underlined my, and pinned it above my desk like a war medal. But the real gift came 3 days later, wrapped in sound waves and smugness. He went on a podcast, one of those insufferable industry broadcasts hosted by a guy who ends every episode with a quote he misattributes to Steve Jobs. The host lobbed him softballs. Mark, of course, swung like he was auditioning for sainthood. "I told my team," he said, "don't bring me what's safe. Bring me what's disruptive. This idea, this project, it came from that culture of innovation I've worked hard to build." The host chuckled. "So this was your brainchild?" Mark paused, just long enough to make it seem modest. Then, well, let's just say I planted the seed. Every word was recorded, saved, time-stamped, archived by our legal team under a new folder, evidence/willful infringement/. He was so convinced he owned the moment, so desperate to be seen as visionary that he handed us the one thing even the best patent lawyers crave: intent. By the time that episode hit streaming platforms, Novate Corp had already gone into overdrive. Our version of Nightingale wasn't just complete, it was polished. We had alpha testing results from 5 clinics, glowing testimonials, and UI walkthroughs that made Mark's mockups look like a kindergarten coding project. We picked our launch date with surgical precision, exactly 1 month before Titan X's alpha release. A Friday morning blitz, press releases, demo day, surprise keynote hosted by a Harvard-backed physician influencer who dropped the words revolutionary and elegant within the first 2 minutes of the live stream. The buzz hit immediately. Tech blogs lit up. Healthcare IT Twitter trended #Nightingale rising. Shareholders noticed. Competitors noticed. And at Titan X, buried deep in a Slack thread somewhere between panic and disbelief, someone finally asked the right question. Wait, didn't we used to have something like this in the archive? But it was too late. Mark had gone on record, publicly, proudly. He'd rerouted funding, made promises to the board, tied his name, his reputation to something he didn't own, and me? I sat back in my chair, headphones in, playing his podcast interview on loop while emails rolled in from journalists requesting comment. I didn't answer. I just smiled. Because now, King had built his empire on a stolen crown, and the executioners were already sharpening their blades. Mark's empire began to crack the moment Nightingale went live. Not just live loud. Our launch flooded every channel. Thought leaders, clinical partnerships, medical influencers posting walkthroughs. Within 48 hours, we'd hit 500,000 downloads across our trial apps. The press called it a rare union of empathy and engineering. Verge headlines simply read, "They built the future without permission." Inside Titan X, chaos bloomed like black mold. I know this because people started talking. Whispers from old teammates, screenshots, Slack messages, leaks, panic. Did someone leak our deck? Why is their UI identical? Are we being spied on? Mark's first response was rage, then denial, then narrative control. He summoned the entire company to an emergency all-hands meeting. No agenda, no slide deck. Just a brittle man in an overpriced suit standing on a stage, white-knuckling the mic like it owed him money. We were first, he insisted. We're still ahead, and we're not going to let some knockoff app derail what we've built. He paced like a preacher in a crisis of faith, dripping confidence so thick it stained the floor. Then came the moment. The line. The final nail he drove into his own coffin, smiling just a little too wide, sweat shining on his forehead. "You know what we used to call Sarah's pet projects?" he asked, voice dipped in fake nostalgia. "The museum of failed ideas, laughter, that gutless, performative laughter. The kind that comes when people feel cornered and confused, but still want to be on the right side of the room." The moment was captured, recorded, and saved by a sympathetic colleague who sent me the video less than an hour later with a message that simply said, "Not going to believe this, but I did." I watched the clip in my apartment, curled on the couch, sipping wine, bathed in the blue glow of the screen. I didn't smile, I didn't laugh. I just let the feeling wash over me like warm water on frostbitten hands. Mark thought he was swatting away a ghost. What he didn't know was that his little jab was now exhibit A in a case that would bury him. Because while he stood there performing confidence, his legal team was drafting a cease and desist letter that read like the bark of a toothless dog. We received it the next morning. A 10-page threat fist stuffed with legal buzzwords, faux outrage, and a demand to cease use of proprietary material believed to originate from Titan X internal research. Innovate Corp's reply was exactly 12 words. Could you please clarify the date your company first began developing this project? We sent it, then went quiet. And silence, I've found, is the scariest sound in corporate warfare. For 2 days, the noise died. No press, no updates, no movement. Then a courier arrived at Mark's office, dressed in charcoal gray, carrying a thick envelope embossed with a gold seal. Inside, a certified copy of our patent, Sarah, Levin's development and licensing agreement, timestamped alpha testing, results from our partner clinics, and the original rejection email from Mark himself. The cover letter was written in calm, surgical language, but the message was clear. Checkmate was now a formality. Mark had turned an idea he discarded into a monument to his ego, and now that monument was cracking from the base. And me was watching it all from the eye of the storm. Calm, anchored, viciously fulfilled. The punchline he delivered in that all hands, it was never meant for laughs, it was a trigger, and I had just pulled it. It landed on a Tuesday. Like a meteor through the glass roof of Titan X's vanity tower, the lawsuit didn't knock, it detonated. The filing was public within the hour. 23 pages long, thick with citations, and packed with receipts that didn't just burn bridges, napalmed the entire coast. Innovate Corp filed under federal jurisdiction, citing unauthorized use of patented technology, misappropriation of intellectual property, and most damning of all, willful infringement. That phrase, willful infringement, that's the one that changes everything. It's not just a slap on the wrist. It's a gun to the temple of your wallet. It triples damages, it names names. And in this case, it named Mark. Not just Titan X, not just the board, Mark himself. Attached to the lawsuit were exhibits, the patent, sealed and timestamped under my name. The licensing agreement between me and Innovate Corp, legally binding and notarized. Emails showing Nightingale's development timeline predated Titan X's alpha by months. And the final blow, Exhibit F, the email where Mark personally rejected Nightingale. His name, his words, his digital signature. Right above Exhibit G, the transcript from the podcast where he took public credit. His voice, his ego, preserved in amber. By noon, the financial press caught the scent. Innovate Corp files devastating IP suit against Titan X CEO. Leaked documents suggest CEO personally involved in patent theft. Titan X shares tumble amid explosive lawsuit allegations within 48 hours. Titan X's stock plunged 36%. That's not a dip. It's an evacuation. Institutional investors bolted. News anchors speculated in real time. Former employees crawled out of the woodwork with stories they'd been too scared to tell. And then came the real twist of the blade. Word leaked that the board had called an emergency meeting. Not about the product, not about the lawsuit, about Mark. They held the vote behind closed doors, but someone always talks. 10-2. In favor of immediate termination. No severance, no transition package. Just a line in a press release. Titan X announces leadership change amid legal review. Translation: Mark is gone, and we're praying that's enough to save us. I watched the press conference on my laptop, same as I'd watched his smirking all hands. But this time, there was no smirk. Just a board spokesperson reading pre-approved statements about accountability, ethics, and strategic forward realignment. Mark didn't show up, didn't tweet, he didn't post, he vanished. And I felt calm. No fireworks, no champagne. Just that rare, clear silence when you've tied every knot exactly right and the machine runs perfectly toward its end. This wasn't revenge anymore. It was resolution. It was conclusion. The plan had been written in pieces, one rejection email, one signature, one voice memo at a time. And now it was assembled, whole, irrefutable. The company scrambled into emergency settlement talks. The damage was already done. Clients were fleeing. Internal staff morale was radioactive. Everyone was looking for a lifeboat, and the only one afloat was held by the people they tried to bury. Mark was out. Titan X was cornered. And Nightingale was just getting started. The settlement number was so big, the decimal looked like a typo. Titan X folded like a discount lawn chair. Press called it historic, crippling, and unthinkable defeat for a once-dominant player. But the money, my money, was real. 9 figures, most of it wired to Innovate Corp. The rest, licensing, royalties, damages. A cut reserved for the woman whose failed idea had just become the most expensive corporate lesson of the decade. The willful infringement charge broke Mark wide open. Without the company's shield, he was on the hook personally. The courts didn't flinch, came for him like winter. To avoid full-blown bankruptcy, he sold everything: his stock options, his high-rise condo, his Mountain View retreat in Aspen, even the Tesla he used to park diagonally like it was allergic to lesser vehicles. By the end of it, Mark was living in a 2-bedroom rental outside Phoenix, driving a leased Civic, and shopping for suits in whatever outlet mall was closest to shame. I never reached out, never gloated. That's not how this worked, because this was never about watching him suffer. This was about proving I was never the problem. Nightingale didn't just succeed, it dominated. We closed contracts with 3 major hospital networks within the first quarter. VC firms were foaming at the mouth to invest. Healthcare panels started calling me the mind behind the interface and asking for quotes about innovation and inclusion like I hadn't spent the last decade begging to be heard. They didn't know. They didn't need to. I'd already won. The restaurant was all velvet and hush, the kind of place with wine lists thicker than the Book of Job. I sat at a corner table, nursing something imported and aged and probably more expensive than my old car. I wore a dress I hadn't bought on sale. Lipstick like war paint, hair down. The CEO of Innovate Corp arrived late, on purpose probably, and slipped into the seat across from me like he'd done this 1,000 times. He didn't waste time with flattery, just reached into his leather briefcase, pulled out a check the size of a postcard, and slid it across the white linen tablecloth. No envelope, no fanfare. Just numbers and a signature, enough zeros to retire 10 times over. "Thank you," he said, folding his hands. Nightingale wasn't just a great product. It was the perfect legal crowbar we needed to break them. I stared at the check for a long moment. The serif font on the bank name, the ink still fresh. My name spelled correctly, for once. "You're welcome," I said, and meant it. He left shortly after, shaking my hand like we were generals who'd won a war neither of us would admit was personal. I stayed, ordered dessert, something rich and unnecessary. And then I did the one thing I hadn't allowed myself since this all began. I laughed. Not polite, not performative. Laughed, because the museum of failed ideas, it had a new wing now, built from titanium and wireframes and spite. And I was the curator, the architect, the goddamn phoenix. Let them remember my name. Let them choke on it. I was never just an idea. I was the reckoning. You're the real stars of the corporate jungle. Thanks for watching. Hit subscribe, or I'll flick the switch on your old cubicle memories.